And welcome back. We're into week 4 of March, and we're working on rollback, we're working on G, working on wave hands in the clouds this week. So let's get into it. What I wanted to stress in this first drill was the connection from the dantian to the right hand. And you can really feel that when you point the palm up and you advance forward from the rear leg, and the waist, the dantian, is connected to the coiling of the right hand. So the right hand is doing a push to the outside, a deflection. At the same time, it's doing an advance forward and then retracting back and attaching to the opponent's arm as you sit back. So it's important to have all of this connected to the dantian. The tendency is to get focused too much on the hand itself. So what I like to do is close the elbow to the torso, but not completely. Leave a gap between the elbow and the torso, and then push from there. I push and then turn. Push and turn to the right, and the turn to the right drives the outside right deflection. Push and rotate to the right pushes the right deflection and advance to the arm. So you have a forward motion, which is driven by the rear leg, and then you have a right outside motion, which is directed by the rotation of the hips. So you can see how the hand reacts to that. And the goal is to try to keep the wrist and keep the hands and fingers soft. And what I recommend to do that is to keep the mind on the elbow and attach the elbow to the dantian and the hips as they're moving forward and rotating. And you can see how I finish. The hand is off to the side so as to deflect outside of my center. And now we're going into G, and I'm just trying to highlight the motion for G's, for the rollback, and then going into G, which is essentially a Taijiquan motion. And so we're trying to keep to the fundamentals of Taijiquan and our whip analogy. And so I'm doing Taijiquan circling one finger and then going into G from there. In the description, the text description, I mentioned how the left hand is sitting at the waist, and when you rotate the hips to the right, that propels the hand out. So when you push from the back leg and then you rotate the right hip to the right, or rotate the hip to the right, then that propels the left hand into the right hand. Also, what's important is timing of this motion, because when you do G, it's not necessarily that you're accumulating and pushing a lot of force. You're just timing the push to manifest it when the opponent is already off balance. When you pull back, the opponent's energy is coming into you. When you do your roll back, you're helping that energy and you're redirecting it out to the side. Then you're coming with G. So in an ideal, or not an ideal, but a sort of a pushing hands, sparring, or maybe a real life situation, the legs are alive. This posture is fixed, between this 4-6 stance and mountain climbing stance. But I know for myself, the hands are moving back, or the legs rather, are moving back and moving forward. If not just one, then 2 steps. So that's something to keep in mind too. And now this little fun drill, playing with the mind here. I always wanted to try, and I've done it a few times, I've just never repped it out to this extent, doing single whip on the other side. So that's what I'm doing here. What I think might be beneficial for you to keep in mind and remember is that once the whip is set, the beak is set, that's the most yang. Go into yin where you completely soften. Right here, that's most yang. Go into yin where you completely soften. And there you just have a waist turn. The waist turn will guide the hands from there. And I mentioned what the root drill is for this. If you want to go back and just kind of get a little beginning idea, go to this first drill that we did where we're pulling from both sides, because typically we just do the pluck going to the left and then doing the single whip on that right side. So now I'm doing the pluck on the left and the right. So I'm alternating. And this will help give you an idea, because you know that the flip comes right after the pluck. The hand flip right there, right after the pluck. Pluck, flip. Pluck, and then flip. And that's all on the regular side. There, I just go directly into the flip. So from the whip directly into flip, using the waist. And I should clarify the hips. It's actually the hips that turn. The hips turn. And I soften the hands and let the hands follow the hips. There, soften the hands, let it follow the whip or the hip. Let the hands follow, and then I sort of describe this step by step in the text description, where after the flip, it's the hip turning that guides the hands up until the beak, the crane's beak, settles. So we'll try to slow it down a little bit. Flip, hip turn to the left, and then hip turn to the right, and that settles the beak. Hip turn to the right there, and hip turn to the left, and that settles the beak. Hip turn to the right, hands, and so left, right, left, if you could see that. Right, left, right, left, right, and left. And that three motion is those three hip turns is what's going to guide the hands. And that really helps you connect to your dantian for single whip. Turn, flip, turn, beak, turn, flip, turn. Remember that there's a last and final turn that locks the beak and almost whips it. And I would recommend going and referencing white crane whipping jing, because that's essentially white crane whipping jing. So remember here in Wave Hands in the Clouds, the application is to lock the elbow and then use the wrist grab and elbow lock to offset, off center, and possibly even throw or break the elbow. And I just rep it out in the horse stance here. It's a good way to get some horse stance training. Typically when you're doing the leg switch, the leg and the hand will both switch at the same time, so that's important to remember. The arm positions are important to remember, but what I mentioned in the text description for me was important to keep the pong, because my mind gets situated on the hands and the arms, then I forget the pong structure, which is part of the root. And that bottom wrist, it might be a little bit pointing up. That will influence the softness of the wrist. And you actually want that wrist right there, the bottom hand, you want that maybe a little bit more relaxed. So typically I hold a little bit too much tension in that bottom wrist. Inhale, exhale, inhale, switch, exhale, turn. And this is all rotation. There's still spine here and there's still chest, and you can see how I sink the weight and I root as well. I drop. Yeah. So that's this week's, guys. Hope you enjoy. See you next week.